A little bit about me. I've been in product for about 20 years or so. I've had a few executive roles, high growth startups in Silicon Valley, Fortune 500 companies, teaching at Stanford. Today I'm a mentor at a couple of startup accelerators, and I do advisory and consulting for companies. And I wrote a best-selling book, The B2B Innovators Map, which is what I'm going to talk about today. And if you have good questions, there are 2 free books for whoever asks good questions. As when I said in my pitch earlier, right, the goal of product management is to get at the bottom of the needs of our users so that we can build products that can solve those needs and therefore make some money for our companies. But if you work in B2B, it's really hard to access those people. And so oftentimes you end up resolving to just talking to sales or just getting anecdotal information internally. And that's why the majority of new B2B new products fail. Over 90% of those products fail. So it's a terrible statistic and is very demoralizing for us as product people and our teams. So why is it so hard to access B2B users, right? Well, first of all, is because they're not readily available. They are focused in their business. So any minute that they spend talking to you, it's a minute that they're not spent tending to their business. So they don't have time for this, basically. Another one is that you need to access very specialized functions. I always joke that when I go to conferences, sometimes they say, well, so here's some great feedback. To get access to users, just park your team at a Starbucks and just show people there your app. And it's like, I am building, high critical infrastructure for utilities in the renewable space that connect to nuclear plants. Like, how many nuclear plant operators are going to walk through a Starbucks, right? So that's just silly for B2B. So how do you actually get access to these people? And then in B2B, either we like it or not, sales is king. So oftentimes they are the saleskeeper, their gatekeeper, and they might not let us close to their customers. And it's right? Oftentimes they've been burned by junior PMs that go out and talk to customers, and they say the wrong thing, or they harm the deal in a way, right? So it's justified, and I've been in those shoes. So how do you do it? By the way, does this resonate with you? I see a lot of nodding. Anybody been in one of these positions before? Which one have you experienced?
We have an idea that validate the idea, like how do you start getting feedback on this?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Sometimes sales people create a picture of what the customer thinks of you very differently from when you go beyond the barrier of sales and directly talk to the customer. It's a different picture altogether.
Right.
It's shocking.
It is shocking, and oftentimes, it's a really good point, and oftentimes product teams build products out of that perspective, and then you end up with a bunch of one-offs that don't scale, right? So big problem for us. So what do you do? My advice is to take matters into your own hands as the product team, and you have to make the conscious effort to build a network of people that you can come back to get this feedback. And I call this a discovery network. This is a group of people that are in your target market, very important, that you can often go and ask them for feedback. You can interview them. You can interact with them. And it's very important for them to be in your target market. Oftentimes, I talk to companies that say, well, we have this idea that can be for manufacturing and for healthcare and for transportation. Those are very different people with very different needs. And so the pre-work that you need to do is to have alignment with your company on what target market you are actually trying to get to. Because otherwise, if you're trying to build a network of people to talk to, if that target market is not tight, you're going to end up talking to everybody, and you don't get cohesiveness of problem to go after and solve. So once you have a target market, then you need to build a network that the product team, quote unquote, owns, that you can actually go back and forth and get this feedback. Now, to your point, how do you do that, right? Okay, so some advice that I have for building this network, well, the idea is you're gonna start creating a collection of people that you can relate to, right? So there's 2 steps to this. You have to build that network, and then you have to have them trust you. So let's talk about how do you first collect the names, right? So start with your network, your personal network. I've had these exercises with my product teams in the past when we're trying to go after a specific market. I call it a networking session, and we say, okay, we're trying to go after this type of user profile. Who do we know? First connections, second connections in LinkedIn that fit that profile. Okay, add them to a list. Who do you know that you can actually pick up the phone or send an email, and you know that they are likely going to return the call, right? That's what you start. You start building your list out of people you know. And that's one of the pet peeves that I have oftentimes with product management that say, we don't need industry expertise, right? Because you know how to talk to people, you can do whatever. Maybe, but here in B2B, it's important to have that industry expertise because it also comes with industry connections, right? If you don't have connections and you don't know anybody in the industry and their problems, it's a lot harder to get started, okay? So sometimes you can't find people that are exactly who you need, so you can find proxies. So a proxy is a lookalike, somebody that it's maybe a peer to the person that you're trying to reach. Let's say that you're looking for director of operations of manufacturing facilities. Well, maybe you find somebody that is an operations engineer that knows the job, or maybe it's something that somebody that used to be this role, but now it's at a different company, or maybe it's a friend of a friend that kind of understands what's going on, right? Start there, make those connections. Leverage social media, and by social media, I don't necessarily mean like you go post on Twitter all day, which you can, but the idea is who is active in, let's say, LinkedIn that fits your target market that you could connect with. Who in your connections knows these other people that you might be able to follow? What are they saying? What companies are there for? It helps if you have a list of companies that you have identified could be potential targets. And then through LinkedIn, you can start figuring out, well, who works there in which roles? Because sometimes we can start saying, well, we need this particular role. We need a director of operations. Well, turns out that they don't call it like that. They call it something else. And so you don't understand that until you actually start digging into these people, right? Industry groups. It's a great way because, there's a saying about birds and feathers, which I don't remember, but anyway. So people that are similar hang out together. And this is going to be recorded, right? Yeah, great. And so if you go into, let's say, LinkedIn or an industry group, there's going to be a lot of people in that industry that have some of those challenges. So you can start identifying who meets your criteria, and then you can start connecting with them. Conferences. Conferences like this are very useful. Me, believe it or not, I'm an introvert, so I struggle in this kind of environments, but conferences can be really useful from a different perspective. You can look at who is speaking at all these conferences, and then that usually are people that are willing to talk to you. And so you can actually make a list of like, oh, all these people from these companies are going to be there. Also, some conferences, especially smaller conferences, will actually give you out the list of attendees when you pay for your ticket. So that you have a hit list of people that you can connect with. Agencies and consultants, sometimes there are companies that all they do is connect you with experts, so you can use them as proxies. Sometimes consultants that are very experienced in a particular industry will have a ton of connections, so they might be able to point you in the right direction. And then, of course, work with your sales team, but more on that later, okay? I'll have some time at the end for some questions, but just as a show of hands, does this sound reasonable, how to find these folks? Okay? It is work, I'm not gonna lie, right? But this is something that you are planting so that later you can have this pool of people that you can contact for interviews, visits, etc. Now, the main thing is that you have to give in order to receive. Like I said, these people are busy. They're not gonna just say, hey, sure, drop by, I'm gonna do things. You have to nurture relationships with them. You have to provide value to them so that when you have an ask, they're saying, yeah, Dan, I trust you. Let's have coffee and I can answer your questions because they've received so much value from Dan that it's just how it is, right? So how do you do that? As a product team, especially as a company, there's a couple of techniques that I want to recommend. So the key here is to become a trusted advisor, you need to answer their most pressing questions. They need to see you as somebody that knows their pains and is providing answers to that. And so there are multiple ways that you can do that. One of them is creating content. So you can partner with your marketing team and you can say, hey, in our blog, can we create content that answers some key questions that we know our customers have? Or, you and your team can have that thought leadership and you can post these things in LinkedIn or you can do all those things. And you can start attracting people. And this is just typical content marketing, right? You can create posts and then ask for signing sheet if you want to enter your email address if you want to continue hearing more about this stuff. And that mailing list starts becoming a list of your discovery network because eventually you're going to have an ask, right? You can also do events, right? For example, if you are a sponsor at this event and your target market is product managers, well, hey, you can sponsor and then you have a reason for talking to more people directly, right? You can do talks, you can do meetups, you can do Ask Me Anythings, especially in industry groups. The product team can be positioned really as an expert. And then you can have an Ask Me Anything session online, open it up as a webinar. Even if 10 people sign up, these are 10 people that now know you, you've delivered some value, and then you can call back on, right? One thing that I emphasize in my book is that in B2B, when you're doing discovery, you need about 8 to 12 people that are giving you a similar answer to get some validity. So you don't need 10,000 people in your list, right? If you have my advice, and you'll see it in a second, is 30 people. If you have 30 people that you can call on, probably 8 will say yes, and then you can start from there, right? Interest groups, just different ways to attract community, right? Training sessions, right? If you understand their most pressing problems and you say, hey, we can go to your city or we can do it virtually and we're going to do a 2-hour workshop on this topic with your peers, free. Okay, they're going to see you as an expert and then you have them captive and then it's a lot easier to ask for their time to ask them your questions. Now, the most important thing here is to remind yourself that you're not selling. You are providing value and you're building this relationship with your potential customers so that when you need to ask some questions, you have this trusted pool of people that can answer those questions. I see a lot of times product managers, more junior PMs, when they are talking to somebody in this scenario, they spot a potential challenge for the customer and they just flip into sales mode. Oh yeah, well we have this thing and this thing. And that's not the time to do that, right? Because you break that trust that you're nurturing. You're not sales, right? You are the product team and your goals are very different. You don't want to sell them anything, right? That's very important. And that's why this is very key to have your own pool of people that are different from the ones that sales is managing for their own deals, because those can have conflicting priorities, okay? Yes, actually one question and then we continue.
Yeah, I want to come back to this.
Perfect. How are we doing on time?
You have about 15 minutes.
Okay. Yes, we'll get to your question then. Okay, so let me continue, and then when we look at everything, we can have questions. Now, as I said, in B2B, sales is king. So there's no way around it. So just as you have to build your own discovery network outside for your own customers to do your own discovery, it is very important to do a similar thing internally. And what does that mean? It means that you have to identify key players that you can connect with, nurture, and have them trust you so that when the time comes, they are comfortable bringing you to their customers for you to do discovery, okay? I oftentimes see that this doesn't work when there is a complete disconnect, there's no relationship, there's no trust, and the PM is asking the VP of sales, hey, I need to talk to your biggest account. Can you connect me with the CEO? No, of course not, right? I wouldn't do it. In fact, I feel uncomfortable when my PMs come and tell me, hey, our chief revenue officer told us that we can't talk to this customer. It's like, No, don't talk to them. You shouldn't be right now, right? You haven't built that trust with sales. If we mess up this one, we'll be forever banned of talking to any customers. It's a sensitive thing that you have to build through time. So you identify key players, you make friends with them, right? Sales guys are kind of easy to make friends with. That's their job. But build a relationship, right? At all levels of the organization, all levels of the organizations, from account management to entry level to field engineers, because in B2B, there is nothing more powerful than the head of sales. If the head of sales, senior VP, chief revenue officer, trusts you and trusts your team, all doors open, right? They get behind you and they can pitch to you all the way to the CEO. And I've done this at fast growth startups and at Fortune 500 companies, right? These people hold all the keys and they want more business. They want more customers. They just want to make sure that they're giving the keys to somebody they trust. So how do you build trust with sales? There's a couple of tips that I want to share with you here. Take time to learn their needs, their motivations, and their incentives. Incentives is a key part because they are incentivized very differently than the product team. The product team is incentivized for building repeatable things that you can sell to many people over time. Sales are incentivized for closing deals this quarter. Very different, right? So you have to understand how they work, how they measure their work, what do they care, how can you help them? And personally, what's in it for them to let you talk to customers? And I'm telling you this straight, let you talk to customers, because if they don't want to, you don't talk to them, right? And the answer is simple, right? If I am able to build a better product because I've understood our customers better, then you will make more money. That's it, right? Now, easier said than done, because the reality is that they don't understand how you get from A to B. And this is the other part of building that trust. They need to understand your process. They need to understand how does talking to a customer and asking him a few questions without selling anything leads to them getting more money, okay? So in my book, I consolidated the journey for innovation from idea to your first 10 customers in these 6 stages. And so I use this to create a shared language and trust within organizations. And I can tell my counterparts in sales, look, we all agree what we're going to do in strategic alignment. We're going to go after this particular problem statement. We're going to go after, this particular market segment. We're going to go after this particular type of user. Now, in order for me to accelerate this and give you something that you can sell that has a better chance to hit the market successfully, I need to go through these stages. And this is what it means. This is what happens on each stage. Let me show you, right? And as you're earning that trust, I'm going to talk to this customer. Come with me. Review the questions that I'm going to ask them. It's okay, right? It's all part of the building trust. Once they build the trust with you, you're golden, right? But helping them understand how from A to B works, what are the stages? What are you going to do with that information? How does that become an actual product is very important because they don't know that. They don't live in the same world, right? So again, this is the core of what's in my book. So the actuals on how to do it at each stage is in the book. So I'll tell more about it in a second. So to close, I would argue that you should start building your discovery network today. So if you're in B2B, get together with your team, tomorrow, Sunday, no, Monday, and sit down and say, hey, do we have a clear target market? Do we have a clear definition of what our champion is? Okay, can we have a list of 30 of those that we could contact? No or yes? If it's yes, start the process. No? Okay, how do we get those? Where are they? Follow some of these rules, right? So you can start it today. And it's a process, and it's always evolving. As you get more sophisticated, you start automating some of these things, you start putting prompts in your product, you start doing all sorts of things. But initially, you just need to talk to these few people, right? So, with that, thank you so much. Let's keep in touch. There's my information there. I'm trying this. So this is my LinkedIn code. So you can actually click on that one, and we can connect. And let's go to questions. Thank you so much. Okay. Ooh, too many questions. Okay, I think you had the first question. For a book, I'm going to give you a book before you have questions beforehand.
This is great.
Thank you so much.
And I wanted to just emphasize something you said about working with sales. I found that the best way to start developing a relationship with a customer is to ask something about feature development that's a bit off in the distance. And the benefit of that is you're not throwing anything at risk for the sales guy because he's not going to try and sell something that's going to be not delivered for another 6 months. And at the same time, the person, the stakeholder you're going to talk to, the customer you're going to talk to, is sometimes relieved not to talk to somebody who's making a sales pitch. So if you come into that conversation and say, I just need information, I'm not trying to sell you anything, I'm not going to tell you about something that's available immediately, I just need some information for future product development. That's the way to get the foot in the door. After that, it's actually easier to start asking more targeted questions, coming back closer to immediate timelines. I just want to underscore something you said there.
Yeah, I completely agree. Great point. And I think that's one interesting thing, that the building the relationship, once the customer trusts you enough or the prospect trusts you enough, you can warm that relationship enough that I've actually done it myself, where you turn around and say, can I bring, it seems like you're ready to look at these things that we're actually building. Can I bring my sales guy? And you bring a lead to the sale, man, they love you forever. They buy you steak dinner. Sweet. I don't need steak, but anyway. Right? Yeah, exactly. Because at the end of the day, it's showing that we're all on the same team. We are working towards the same thing. We just have we're in different stages of the life cycle of the product, right? Sorry, I think there were some hands here before Roger. Thank you. We'll get back to you. Mm-hmm.
Kind of on the same or similar note, what I've found is that with sales, if you treat sales as if they are the customer or a prospect, and you communicate with them in that way, you build trust because then they can see how you're going to interact with the prospect, because you're interacting with them the same way. And if they see that you're asking lots of questions, you're not telling them how it is, you're not trying to sell something to them, then that breeds some level of trust.
Yeah, I completely agree. Great comment. So,
So you can use them as a resource for product discovery.
right, for
You
sure.
have a lot of customer interaction.
Thank you. That's only the two I have. But if anybody wants an electronic copy of the book, just send me an email or a LinkedIn, and I'm happy to give you a copy of my book. Sorry, let's go in order. You had a hand, and then we can go here and there.
So, if you were to find yourself in a position where your sales team is already affiliated by other PMs on your team,
What makes you think that that has ever happened?
so what would be some tactical tips on how to de-escalate the situation, to get it to at least a neutral state, to start that rapport or trust building, to overcome the wall that's already going to be built?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And the way that I've approached it in the past is going at the highest level that you possibly can. So that's the head of product talking to the head of sales and say, hey, here's what we want to do. Our teams can work this. Like, we can promise that we can do this, and then have a somewhat of the head of sales trusting the head of product, and then it starts trickling down. And then each individual PM has to, make sure that everybody trusts them. But at least you have some sort of cover that at the senior level, they're okay with these interactions continuing, right? So there's a point where there has to be that alignment. So if you're head of product, your role is to get the head of sales on your side so that you can get that coverage for your team. That's your job, if you are the head of product. If you're a product person, then if the situation has been harmed before, your job is to escalate it so that it can get fixed and then trickle down. That's been my experience. Yes, so what did I say? Here, sorry.
So I'm at a company where our direct customer buys our software so that they can use it to engage their direct customers. And so a lot of the features and parts that I work on are not actually as visible to our customers that we might talk to, but it's more visible to the people that they're selling with. So do you have any tactics about how to access like that additional level of distance?
Yeah, that's a really great point. The first section of the presentation, you going out and building a discovery network of your customer's customer target audience, that's where you get that. Because it's really hard to get access across companies. If it's hard across departments, across companies is super hard, right? Because there's a lot of protectiveness. So it's your responsibility to build a network of lookalike people of your customers' customers, so that when you talk to your customer, you can say, I understand what you're after because I've talked to your customers and this is how I provide value to everybody, right? Again, it's a lot of work, but that's how we do it, right? Sorry, we go that and then back to you then.
So this is like an informal way to get what I had the opportunity, maybe some others have, we call our customer advisory council. Like you could grow into it. But the thing is, product people that I've learned in this, like, if you have new products, that customer base you have today may not be the right ones for tomorrow. So you can still follow your guidance. It's just more of a, I come into a situation where they were down this road, but they were talking to the same customers for a new product that doesn't have the same target market. So they were making not great decisions for the new product because they were basing it on a different set. So you have to be careful about how you're choosing that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And in my book, I'm very specific about that in two ways. One is you have to make sure you have the right target market. And the other one is you have to make sure if it's a new product to market early adopters. If you have a large corporation that has been successful, your existing customers are probably not early adopters or like pragmatists to use the Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, right?
Like you background is infrastructure software. You don't have a lot of early adopters in the infrastructure service space.
You do, yeah, you do. And we can talk more about that. I've worked in multiple industries, but yeah, we can talk more about that. But anyway, so early adopters, and then your target market. Good question, though. Dan.
I actually have a cheat and two quick questions.
Hey, you don't get a book because you already have like 3.
Is it buyer personas, user personas, or both?
Great question. So in here, so in the book, I divide market discovery. Here's where you talk to your buyer persona, and there's one part. But then there's the user personas, which might be many in B2B. That's a different group. I suggest always starting with this, because usually these people can tell you, I have a trick question. It's like, walk me through who is involved in doing this task. If you ask your buyer, and they would list all the different users. And then, they can usually give you access to users if you have the trust here. And so you don't really need to build that from scratch as much, has been my experience.
All right, and then my second question is, so once you have that buyer champion, so you talked about building your network and then establishing trust. And one of the last bullet points on building your network was agencies or consultants. And obviously, the building and the establishing the trust is a lot of work. How effective is it just to shortcut it to outsource it to an agency and just pay people to give their advice?
Not very useful, because you want to be in control of those conversations, and your team has to have a first account of the interviews. What it's okay, and I've actually done before, is pay people to go seek out these people and somehow get them to talk to you.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Okay, that's kind of what I was asking. And then they hand it off to you.
Yes. But that, in my experience, it's more rare. In fact, when I engage with a lot of UX agencies or research agencies that I might outsource some of this work, usually, and I have worked at a UX agency before, usually one of the main things you ask is, yes, but you give us the people to interview. So that is not that common. It's ideal, right? But it's not that common. Wrap it up. I was like, is it like Texas rodeo here? Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all your questions. Let's definitely keep in touch. And again, if you want a copy, electronic copy of my book, just send me a message and I'll be around to hang out. Thank you so much.